Hi, I'm Michael Depp, editor of TV News Check, and I'm with Paige Albiniak, contributing writer for TV News Check, and we are Talking TV. Hi, Paige.
Hello, Michael. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, and we are talking TV amid a raging, dramatic thunderstorm in the background here. So these are not piped in effects, they are actual, if we have cracking thunder and lightning behind
It's
me.
live TV, Michael.
Great, it's exciting.
Yeah.
So, Paige, you did a great story for us this week, looking at the issues facing live television, live TV being kind of one of its greatest value propositions for viewers in an age of streaming, and yet it has had some problems. And I'd like to start out asking you, what has been the crux of the problem for live TV viewing during the pandemic?
Well, it's interesting because definitely at the beginning of the pandemic, what I thought was that TV, it would be this great boon for television because, everyone's at home. So they'll be watching TV all the time. And at the beginning, that was true. As the pandemic has gone on and on and on, people have kind of gone back to dealing with their lives. I think that's one piece of it. I think things that they spent time being interested in the past, like football or baseball, things like that, are less interesting. There's multiple reasons for that. The reason I got mostly from TV researchers was that the absence of a live audience affects the amount that people want to view. So that's one reason. And people also will make that argument for like syndicated shows, that with those talk shows, people don't want to watch them with no audience. I don't know. I mean, they're doing research with focus groups, so I'm assuming there's truth to that. To me, one of the things I think is that there's a lack of stakes. So if you're the NFL season and you're building into the Super Bowl, but it's a really weird season where a bunch of stuff got canceled and you don't feel like it's full force, I think you're less interested in the whole season long arc of it. And then taking that theory to award shows, I think it's the same. Whereas not so much with TV, because TV is as strong as ever, but like with the Oscars, which we don't know how it's going to do, but the guess is that it will be down. This is just, it's not a full strength movie year. People held back a lot of movies because there was nowhere to release them. So, and it's funny because people will say people haven't seen these movies, but truthfully, these are probably the most accessible movies ever. You can see them all on streaming, which you've never been able to see all of them on streaming before. So, but what happens with Oscars remains to be seen, but that's the guess. So there's multiple factors that are weighing into why live television is less. One other piece is that in this pandemic year, we saw multiple streaming services come online. We saw HBO Max, we saw Peacock, Discovery Plus just came online. So on-demand viewing has only accelerated and drastically during the pandemic.
Right. But even if live viewing is down, it seems that advertisers are still drawn to it. So why?
Mm-hmm. Well, this was sort of the thesis of my story, which is that there's still nothing else like it. There's nothing else that accrues an audience like a big live television event. So the Super Bowl, which is maybe the exception that proves the rule, if I understand that phrase correctly. So that Super Bowl was, if I remember correctly, the lowest rated of all time. I think ultimately 96.4 million tuned in, including streaming. So that was down, but you're still gathering 100 million people to see ads, basically. And there's nothing else like it on TV. And they'll take that to the NFL, down 7% across all games average this season. And then they still did a $110 billion deal for 10 years across 4 services. And, the NFL still brings audiences that are 3 times anything else. So that's sports. Now, it's less for NBA, it's less for MLB, all of that, but it's still sports. You're still get a bigger audience that you can have all at once to show your product to. Now, where this becomes less so, again, is award shows. So the Academy Awards used to be the biggest entertainment show on TV. That's been declining every year. What happens with those shows? Oscars, Globes, Emmys, that's what we don't know, because they have been going down and people don't think they'll go back up. And People don't watch TV in that same way anymore. And a lot of what gets nominated and awarded is kind of obscure. So those shows face a different problem than sports.
Right. But I'm going to come back to that in just a moment, but it seems based on your story that we now have this bifurcation of the marketplace between live and on-demand viewing. So can you explain that dynamic and how it's playing out?
I'm going to start with a kind of a counter example, which is that one thing that's happening, I think that's been happening for a while, you saw it really happen with Game of Thrones. Now you saw it with WandaVision, and you're seeing it with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is that those are on-demand plays, but they're getting a lot of engagement across fandom, podcasts, social media. So that's a place where those things have value because of the live conversation that happens afterwards. So that's sort of a separate thing, but that issue has value. There's just like I said before, there's no other place to bring together an audience like live television, especially broadcast TV, because everyone has it. Everyone does not have Disney Plus. Everyone does not have HBO Max. Everyone has access to NBC. And one other good example of this, which is a very hard thing to recreate, but that really showed what this power is Oprah's interview with Meghan and Harry, which, overnight, I believe 17 million viewers and more probably across, and is still in the conversation. As Prince Philip died, they're still referring back to that interview. So, the more kinds of things that television can get like that, the better. I think the other thing, though, is that even though those kinds of things have incredible value, it's just harder to find them. They are less common. It used to be, everybody gathered around for must-see TV on Thursday night. Now that's much harder to come by. So the rarity of it is the challenge, but it's also the value.
We can be sure that they will try to catch that lightning in a bottle and recapitulate that dynamic, but it's hard. There was a certain spontaneity to that, even though, of course, it was planned. But cultural phenomena nature of it was somewhat spontaneous. So you keep bringing up award shows. They seem to be really more acutely suffering. So what's the prognosis for those shows, both in the short and in the long term?
Well, if I had the answer to that question, I would be doing a different job. But I think that, as somebody said in the story, that in the next, those award shows ratings are down from 5 years ago, and they aren't going to come back up. Unlike things like the NFL, which post-pandemic people expect to rebound, the Emmys are probably never going to come back to where they were in like 2013, which is closer to 10 years ago. Same with the Oscars. So, I think the real question to consider is, with streaming, what do you do to these award shows to make them more interesting to everybody and to get more exposure? Somebody brought up, and I believe this was the NCAA, no, the NCAAP. No, it wasn't March Madness. It was the Image Awards. And they were played across all of the Viacom CBS platforms. So that includes Paramount Plus and CBS and BET and BET Plus. And so they, across those platforms, accrued a bigger rating. So I think you'd see more things like that, like the Oscars. ABC has the rights. You'll probably see that air on Disney Plus, on Hulu, and maybe do some Oscar packaging, ways to increase the viewership across. And then I personally think, and this is what we haven't really seen, is cracking the code on how do you make those feel more interesting to younger people, more social media friendly, less like, here's an award, here's a speech. The Grammys, at least, or the MTV Video Music Awards, have performances that are live, typically. Not so this year, yes, but in like socially distanced areas. But those shows have a draw because that's spontaneous and it's a performance. The Emmys and the Oscars, it's just celebrities handing out statues. So I think that's what needs to change.
It seems just like a massive generational difference here, and the entire code of these kinds of shows needs to be rewritten to be relevant. It just won't be a 3-hour award show, or the Oscars, goes on to 4 hours sometimes, is not going to cut it, and had been declining for years anyway. From what I've heard about the Oscars, they're looking at this year, of course, the stakes seem to be doomed to failure in many ways, before it even happens. But I think that they're aiming for something of a more cinematic approach to the way that they're producing it, something that cuts the cloth from the previous examples or previous shows. But I guess we are going to need to see an overhaul in order for them to start to and be relevant in a whole different paradigmatic way.
I mean, this year will be different just because it's COVID. So, they're going to do it in person, but with no audience. So that'll feel different than what we've seen so far, but still feel COVID-y, which is a thing. Like, people are sick of seeing COVID-y stuff. You'll have Steven Soderbergh producing it, which that could provide a really interesting twist. But I don't know that
heist element to it. Then, in other words, like an ocean.
Yeah. Well, that would be better. If they had a heist, people stole the statues or something.
Yeah.
I mean, what's interesting about the award shows, though, is, and this is not really a live TV issue, but the real value of award shows is actually the marketing. So not just the marketing for the network that carries them, because that's part of it, but also for the products that are highlighted within them. So, for example, HBO's used its Emmy wins as marketing for many years and kind of set the standard for that, which Netflix then kind of came in and took over the playbook for that. And then on the Oscars, Netflix has, and Comcast has this too, this whole section of like, here, watch our Oscar stuff. And so as a marketing piece, those shows have a lot of value. So, that's another piece you have to factor in, like, how relevant are the ratings versus what kind of brand value do you get out of them?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think as this discussion continues to evolve, go on, we need to bring psychologists into it. It seems like, to really understand the psyche of the market, even more than.
If only there were more psychologists, really.
Dedicated to television consumption, but we'll find them. Well, thanks very much, Paige. It's an interesting story. You can read it now on TV News Check. And as ever, you can find this podcast not just on TV News Check's homepage, but in all of the places where you consume audio podcasts. Thanks a lot, Paige. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Michael. Stay dry.
Thanks. Bye.